Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel as well as back to another Animal Artist Collective video. Now I have to admit that I have been waiting for this theme of urban wildlife for months now. Urban wildlife has always been something I've been super passionate about, and I am so excited that it made it through not only the other artists who I think I had to convince a little bit at the beginning, but also through our poll that you guys vote on. You guys actually chose urban wildlife, and it was against a pretty tough competitor with grasslands and savannas, which would include all of your African species. But one of the reasons I am so passionate about urban wildlife is because it is by far the largest habitat now on land on the planet. We as humans have kind of taken over the world, and a lot of the previous wild spaces are now industrialized cities. And there are some really amazing animals that have adapted to living alongside humans to make use of this space. As most people who have met me can attest to, I have an unusual fondness for one of the animals that lives here in North America that has not only been very successful in forests across the country, but also in our urbanized cities. And the animal that I chose without thinking, without hesitating, without batting another eyelash about is the Virginia opossum. A little bit later on in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm so passionate about opossums, but first I wanted to tell you a few general facts about them. And when I say a few, well, it's probably more than a few, and it's probably more than you ever wanted to know about opossums or thought that you could know about opossums, but I do promise I pared down my list a bit as I could talk about them for hours. Opossums are not the same animals as possums, even though a lot of people in North America colloquially use that word to describe them. The word opossum comes from an Algonquin Native American word that meant white-faced animal or white-faced dog. Possums, on the other hand, are another, well, not just a species, but numerous species of animals from Australia and South America that were actually named after the opossum by English-speaking peoples. All of these animals collectively are marsupials, but the really cool thing about Virginia opossums is that they are the only marsupial that we have native to North America. As many of you probably already know, marsupials are a subgroup of mammals that have a special way of raising their babies via pouches on their bellies, such as the kangaroo and koala that you find in Australia. Coming back to our opossums, I mentioned earlier that they originally were found east of the Mississippi River. They were introduced by humans to the western United States as game animals, I believe, which is a little bit odd, and since then have become very successful all across the country. Typically, when an animal is introduced into an area where they are not from, that is called an invasive species because oftentimes those animals can drive other animals that are native to that area out. They can outcompete them for different resources like food and shelter and so on and so forth. But opossums are really amazing because they kind of fill this niche that not a lot of other animals fill. Even though opossums are generally considered pests or animals that people just don't want around them, they are amazing for their ecosystems as they are opportunistic scavengers, which means they're going to clean up everything else on the ground, in their forests, in their cities, that other people don't want to deal with. Well, not people, animals, but also people because of the cities thing. One of the things that opossums are criticized most for in a lot of city environments is that they come into people's yards and eat their pets' food. Now, let's go ahead and take a step back for just a moment and think about this from the perspective of the opossum. As I mentioned, they are scavengers who are just trying to clean up after other animals or creatures in the forest. When they come along into a yard, they're acting instinctually and they see food on the ground and they're like, hey, maybe I should clean that up. And also, yeah, it's a free meal because they don't have to work very hard for it. They're going to go ahead and eat that food or even maybe get into trash if it's left open or something like that. They are not as smart as raccoons. They are not as strong as raccoons, so they're not going to be able to get into really well closed or fixed trash cans. If you do have a problem with opossums coming into your yard, you can just make sure to secure the lids of your trash cans and they won't be able to get in. And also to go ahead and pull your pet's food in at night if that bothers you. Now, while it might be a tiny little extra step in your routine or day, your cat and dog don't need to eat in the middle of the night, and it's ultimately healthier for wildlife for them not to eat these prepackaged foods and instead to encourage them to use their natural foraging behaviors to find other food sources. A common misconception with opossums is that they harbor a lot of diseases, and particularly rabies, but that is completely false, as opossums, as well as other marsupials, have relatively low body temperatures, and they actually cannot harbor the virus that causes rabies. They don't carry it. It's like a tiny, minuscule percentage of them. I'm guessing that this myth kind of got spread because other animals here in North America, like raccoons or skunks, can carry rabies and can pose a threat to that, but opossums are not part of that. Another thing that they are particularly great at is eating lots and lots of ticks, and during tick season, and especially with the Lyme disease concerns lately, if you see an opossum in your yard or around your community, you should just thank it for being there, because they can eat hundreds of ticks every single day, and they help keep that insect population in control. Now, I will admit that wild opossums can look a little rough around the edges, but they have had some hard lives in there. One of the reasons why people are so fearful or even hateful towards them is because when they are frightened, they show off their big old mouth full of teeth. They do have 50 teeth, which is more than any other North American land mammal, which I think is actually pretty darn cool, but they use those teeth for eating all of those scavengery type things that I mentioned, and for trying to scare off predators. So unless you go shoving your hand inside an opossum's mouth, the chances of them harming you are very small. This is true of most wild animals, but think about an opossum's size, think about what eats them, think about what they eat, and they are way more afraid of you than you are of them. In fact, they actually have a famous mechanism for handling how fearful they are of other things, and that is that they play possum. When opossums play dead, they're not thinking, oh, hey, I need to outsmart this animal or anything. As much as I love them, opossums are not incredibly intelligent animals, but it is a basic physical response that these animals have to avoid confrontation. If we take a look at opossums in a wild natural setting, say a mountain lion is trying to capture an opossum for a meal, the opossum is first going to open those teeth, try to scare off the mountain lion. If the mountain lion doesn't budge, then what the body of the opossum actually does is it completely locks up and freezes. They fall over, they open their mouth, show all those teeth, they drool everywhere, and they excrete a very foul-smelling odor. Now, if you're the mountain lion trying to eat the opossum and your prey just falls over dead in front of you and starts smelling really bad, you maybe think to yourself, hey, there's probably something wrong with this animal and maybe I shouldn't eat it. And then they go ahead, walk away, and the opossum wakes up a little while later and is on its way as well. Where this tactic is not so handy is in these urban settings that we are talking about in this round of AAC, is that if an opossum is trying to cross the road and a car is the one doing the scaring and their body freezes up and stiffens out on the road, they fall over, they're not going to escape danger, they are going to be hit by a car instead, which is why we see so much roadkill. Now, opossums are not endangered themselves as a species, but I feel like they represent this idea or this concept of humans living alongside nature and the misconceptions that often arise from those situations. And if we just take the time to get to know them a little bit better and to know why they're here, what they're doing, what their job is, and if they pose any harm to us, the whole world would be a lot better off. And that's what I'm trying to convey with this video. Now, my personal connection to opossums come from my zoo educator days, of course, and I think over the course of the time that I spent at the zoo over 12 years, I knew 6 different opossums. Why so many, you ask? Well, unfortunately, opossums have a very short lifespan, especially if we consider their overall body size. They only live to be about 1 to 2 years in the wild, and their expectancy in captivity isn't that much longer. Most, if not all, opossums that end up in zoological facilities were either opossums that were injured and cannot be re-released by wildlife centers, and or someone tried to keep them as a pet, and that didn't go over well because, as you all know, wild animals do not make good pets because they often have needs that exceed most people's ability to take care of them. The opossum that I found myself most attached to, her name was Lindsey, and she came from the Lindsey Wildlife Center in Walnut Creek, California, which is a little bit north of where I live. They contacted our accredited facility one day saying that they had an opossum that couldn't be re-released, and did we need one for our education program. At the time, we did need one, so we went up to go ahead and meet them up there to meet this little opossum friend who was about 6 months old at the time, I believe, and then eventually bring her back to the zoo where she was an animal education ambassador. Now, a lot of people in general have a hard time picking a favorite animal, and if you ask a zookeeper or zoo educator, that question increases like tenfold in its level of difficulty to answer. There's favorite species to physically work with, there's different species that you love to teach with, and then there are specific individual animals that you grow attached to. I can't explain why or how I got attached so much to this individual opossum, but she was my animal. Now, hopefully we can all laugh about the fact that I am feeling a little bit hormonal right now and probably getting more teary-eyed than I reasonably should, but I have never been so attached to an animal that was not my own personal pet before. Lindsey was an incredible individual. She was an amazing and trusting animal ambassador. She lived her second life as an educator incredibly well, and she touched the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. To this day, the only time I have ever cried harder when losing an animal was when I lost my own horse about a year after I lost Lindsey. And just saying that sentence took like 10 minutes and dozens of deep breaths. So I know that a lot of people probably came into this video or just walk through life with a fear or dislike for these animals, and possibly for good reason. Again, if you back them into the corner, they're going to fight for their lives and show you how many teeth they have and try and look big and scary. But I hope that this video has conveyed my passion for them to you guys and to maybe inspire you to look past the exterior and kind of think about why certain animals behave or are the way that they are. Now, you are watching a time lapse of a portrait of Lindsey come together here, and that might seem pretty straightforward after all of that gushing I did talking about her, but the artistic process for this piece was actually fairly difficult for me. As you guys know, I've been traveling a lot and wasn't home to be working on this piece. So I had my sketchbook, I was playing with different ideas, I was talking to the other girls in the collective and trying to get their feedback. I wanted to push myself as an artist, I wanted to do something outside the box. And all these things were kind of floating around. And of course, I had this photograph in mind that I had taken many years ago. But I also wanted to work on this illustrative piece of a mother opossum with her babies and do something really cute. I thought that you guys might like that. And I might do that idea in the future. In fact, I'm pretty sure I will. So if you want to see that, make sure you're following me over on Instagram in case I post that in the somewhat near future. But I felt like doing one of those other ideas would not be being true to myself, and it wouldn't convey the same passion about these animals as if I did this portrait of Lindsey. So that is the painting that you have here today. In terms of the supplies I used, I kept things pretty simple. I used Kilimanjaro natural white watercolor paper, my Pentel aquash, and then a couple of colors. The main one is Sodalite Genuine from Daniel Smith. That's the main gray tone that you're seeing here. I used a tiny bit of the Piemontite Genuine if I needed to neutralize that Sodalite a little bit more. And then for the nose, I wanted something that didn't granulate because their noses are very smooth. So I used Permanent Rose from Mission Gold, as well as a tiny bit of Lemon Yellow from Daniel Smith to neutralize that pink a little bit. I finished off the painting using my Escoda Perla brush and the I always call it Bulletproof. It's called Bleed Proof White Ink, which is a water-soluble ink, and those were made for the whiskers, and I think that's about it. In terms of where the funds for this original piece are going per our mission for the AAC, I have chosen the Lindsey Wildlife Center, which is where Lindsey got her name from and where she came from. So I would like to give back to them for touching my life so deeply. If you would like to find this original piece or any of the pieces by the other AAC artists, you can visit their own respective shops to help raise money for conservation and wildlife efforts around the globe. We do have some amazing pieces in the collective this time around, so make sure you go out and visit all of the other artists. There is a playlist in the description below, so you can go ahead and find those, including our newest guest artist, Mary Sanch, who is incredible. I've given her shout outs in other videos, and I'm really excited to have her joining us this time in the collective. So if you want to see her work, her video is in that link as well. Thank you guys so much for supporting everything we do here with AAC. If you want to vote on the next theme, that is live over on Facebook, and we would love to hear what you would like to see next. We only have 2 more themes this year, guys. It feels like just the other day, Jennifer and I were talking about founding this group of artists, and I'm so excited to see where we have come. One more tiny little piece of housekeeping before you guys go. I've already posted on social media as well as the YouTube community tab, but in case you haven't seen those forms of communication, I do have new zipper pouches in the shop. I know some of you guys were waiting for those to come back in stock. I have a bunch of new designs over there, so you can go ahead and check those out if you want. Link is in the description below with everything else I've mentioned. So thank you guys so much for watching today. Thank you for listening to me ramble about opossums for what was probably way too long. And if you have more questions about opossums, leave them in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I will be back hopefully pretty shortly this weekend with my 25,000 subscriber Q&A that I owe you guys. Thank you for being patient with me on that, and I will see you in the next video. Happy painting!